Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Game gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Game gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says Claire in the house.
Now tap that screen.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says hello in the house.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Welcome, Gremlin, to the game grotto. Welcome, Gremlin.
Blair Ellis
to the
says,
game
hey
grotto.
Gaga, hey Grumps.
Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab your heart.
Grumps says welcome,
Share
one
us
and all.
round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Anna in the house.
Anna says this my favorite song of the loop.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Game gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Let's see those team stickers flow. Game gremlins on the scene.
Benjamin is in the house.
Grumps says
Now tap that
I
screen.
see.
Gaga Grumps says mine is Wigglebutt.
Now tap that screen. Game gremlins on the scene.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Grumps in the house.
Grumps says that Lauren Hart hands hair.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Lauren in the house.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Ollie in the house. Gaga Grumps says it's nice and chill day.
No audio, Gaga. No audio, Gaga. No audio, Gaga. No audio, Gaga. Thanks for the follow. People drop them in the chat. Think they're clever, but they ain't all that. All we cheer is no audio, Gaga. No as you either. No audio, Gaga. All those vowels are to blame. Extra guesses risk losing the game. All we cheer
Grumps
is
says at WFC Oscar never ever.
no as you either. No audio, Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says so who is ready to Wordle with Gaga this fine Sunday.
Grump says at
We
WFC
would be
Oscar
honored
terrible starter.
if you would join us.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says IDF in the house. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Claire. Gaga Grumps says I'm doing good today. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
IDFW says you're a part of my daily routine, lol. Can't do anything F4, 0 lol.
Grump says treasure box is open. Grump says at WFC Oscar precisely.
Gaga Grumps says that's what I like to hear. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
IDFWU says Seaman TTS.
Gaga Grumps says oh no, we are starting with A.
IDFW, you says I didn't say that, but okay, DTS law.
Welcome Jake's D Prince to Wordle with Gaga.
No audio, Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says for the newbies in the chat.
No audio, Gaga.
Grump says next one to say audio gets a timeout.
IDFW, who says nitrogen monoxide audio gaga.
Think they're clever.
Welcome Suzetex to Wordle with Gaga.
All we cheer is no audio, Gaga. No as you either. No audio, Gaga.
Grump says that either spam enough spamming.
All those vowels are to blame. Extra guesses, risk losing the game. All we cheer is no audio, Gaga. No as you either. No audio, Gaga.
IDFW says she's not taking your guess unless you win the light race.
Gaga Grumps says like race
IDFW says
incoming.
that, are you
Tap
serious?
those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top. Like-a-thon, tap and don't stop. Like-a-thon, who will be crowned? Like-a-thon, gremlin renowned. Like-a-thon, fingers on fire. Like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire. Like-a-thon, hearts be flying. Like-a-thon, gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Anybody get down? It's a freaking sniper! Ha ha! Ha ha!
Gaga Grumps says IDF won the race, but Grumps stole that crown. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with a please, Grumps.
O Creative 1 says the A.
Grumps says angst for wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says you gotta expect a snipe on a lol. Gaga Grumps says angst you got. LL Creative 1 says in here. Gaga Grumps says wipeout denied a yellow N needs a home.
Grumps says we're playing it like that again, are we?
O Creative 1 says nappy.
IDFWU says lemon.
Grumps says it a no SA.
Thanks for the follow.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says creative in the house. Gaga Grumps says mound fits.
O Creative 1 says here, Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says no change 8 letters wiped from the game.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Grumps says let's keep the spamming to a minimum. If you post the same 5 times, I might be tempted to calm you.
Gaga Grumps says repeating your word over and over is the surefire way to make me ignore it.
O Creative 1 says nicer.
We would be
Gaga
honored
Grumps says
if you
nicer
would join
words.
us.
Grumps says it HANDBAGS4WHINERS. Grumps says it Alfredo 25FG what?
Gaga Grumps says I moved into number 1 Wordle Street and still homeless. Gaga Grumps says vinyl is a shout.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Ryan in the house.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Rosalind in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Aggie Eats says hello everyone.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Sue's in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grumps says it greater than Aggie Eats less than higher.
We would be honored if you would join us.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose! Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game. Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly!
IDFW, you says nice.
Good game. Which team Good game. Are you on? Team Gaga?
Aggie says finally we get to meet Grumps.
Good game. Team Gaga, are you
Good
ready?
game.
Team Grumps, are you
Good
ready? Gremlins,
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says Dana in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Good game.
Benjamin is in the house. Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Benjamin is in the house. Team Grumps,
Gaga Grumps says Aggie in the house.
Gremlins, let's go. Gremlins, let's go. Game. Gremlins, let's go. Game.
Gaga Grumps says doo-doo for Gaga. Share the live chat, and shower her with roses and GGs.
Grumps says it greater than Aggie Eats less than you hear every line.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says Grumps just came up with an evil scheme.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Aggie Eats says I finally reached level 4.
Well, Creative One says it Gaga and Grumps, what is it?
Grumps says cackles.
Level up.
Grumps says it greater than Aggie Eats less than.
Gaga Grumps says level up coming for Aggie at end of game.
Grumps says still Q. Aggie Eats says water.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A, W.
Grumps says it's Zoe Daniel, yes, please.
Gaga Grumps says you will find out, ha ha ha. Gaga Grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Benjamin is in the house.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts be flying, like-a-thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with W, please, Aggie.
IDFW
Benjamin
says
is
what
in the
happened to the
house.
other like race Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says summer in the house.
Go green.
Aggie Eats says wow.
Grumps says it greater than Aggie Eats less than what's with the tapping afterburner. Grumps says it Lily higher.
Gaga Grumps says it's in review to go live, so I can't use it until published.
Aggie Eats says at Grumps, I don't even know. I am surprised to.
Gaga Grumps says while you got.
Grumps says it's summer look and made it a laugh.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Summer says at Grumps, hey, sorry, I had a really bad day.
Aggie Eats says you wipeout.
A creative one says, at Grumps, did you do any research as to why it doesn't count the likes? Like it's supposed to.
IDFWU says it's a Wordle wipeout. Keaton says start.
Grumps says at Lily it's a sort of sunny Sunday. All is good. Yourself.
Keaton
We
says
would be
start.
honored if you would join us.
Aggie Eats says white outside the chat, everyone.
Keaton says start.
IDFWU says VOD. Car.
Gaga Grumps says called fits.
A creative one says dusty.
Grumps says it's summer in here to brighten it. Grumps says it true. Enough with the Siam.
Gaga Grumps says green U and T moved into 3 and 5.
Keaton says stunt. Grumps says it true. Spamming.
Summer says at Grumps OFCUR.
Gaga Grumps says no R for grunt.
Che says the board looks different.
Gaga Grumps says stunt works. Gaga Grumps says we end in unt. Gaga Grumps says different game shy.
Grumps says I have a word suggestion, but it's only 4 letters long.
Gaga Grumps says TTS has to go off again, sorry guys. Gaga Grumps says lol, of course you do. Gaga Grumps says Gaunt is in the grid.
Grumps says at Alfie no it cannot. Grumps says at WILMA calm down. Grumps says at Lexi higher.
Gaga Grumps says my head is saying vaunt is a thing. Gaga Grumps says so we need a filter. Gaga Grumps says no second T for taunt, no H for haunt.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS do I want to know what?
Gaga Grumps says lovely filter Ryan.
Grumps says at Lexi another year closer to retirement.
Gaga Grumps says and is invalid lol. Gaga Grumps says I think 2 letters is as good a filter as we get.
Grumps says Fjord may filter to your liking.
Gaga Grumps says vaunt it is.
Go green.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Go green.
Right
Gaga Grumps says that is today's masterclass in filter work.
Good game. Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra ra ra. Will the fireworks fly? Good game. A random star chosen by fate.
Go green.
Play a part. It's a live day. Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra ra ra.
Gaga Grumps says, do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Get it in 3. It's do or die. Only in
Gaga Grumps says, can you help me with my daily Wordle? Please go to my page and comment on my posts with words you'd like me to use next.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra ra ra.
Gaga Grumps says, if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next
Good
one.
game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says, oh wait, we still
Good
need a
game.
level up for Aggie.
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says, a quick segue for this. Level up in the room for Aggie.
It's a LLL level up. I guessed it wrong, you guessed it right. Now here we are, another height. If support
Level up.
you'd spell wow. This level's ours, come out with me now. Green,
Grumps says it greater than Aggie eats less than.
glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guessed
Grumps says it Jaden Clarkson hates.
shout out check. New fandom level streak still alive. Wordle solved and you help me thrive. Tomorrow we guess same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Gaga Grumps says, thanks for leveling up in the room, Aggie.
Go green.
Gaga Grumps says, yes, TTS has been disabled for
Go
everyone
green.
except Grumps and I. Too many errors in Tickfinity at the moment. Gaga Grumps says, let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says at RODINA you offering.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C. Gaga Grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Grump says at RODINA no.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn. Fingers on fire like a thorn. Gremlins don't tire like a thorn. Hearts beat flying like a thorn. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C, please creative.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Zoe in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says it happens to everyone, Lexi. Gaga Grumps says crust you got. Gaga Grumps says a green R moved into number 2 Wordle Street.
Thanks for the follow.
Grump says at Gale.ok higher.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says dream fits. Gaga Grumps says we start with DR. Gaga Grumps says drink works. Gaga Grumps says no N for drown now. Gaga Grumps says no E for dryer. Gaga Grumps says O only vowel. Gaga Grumps says only Y. Gaga Grumps says pseudo vowel FTW. Gaga Grumps says Xylol is a valid word but doesn't exactly fit here law.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the Game Grotto. Welcome, Gremlins, to the Game Grotto. Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab your heartbeat. Share us round. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it,
Gaga
tap
Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Game Gremlins on the scene.
Good game.
Game Gremlins on the scene. Game Gremlins on the scene.
Good game.
Game Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the Game Grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and
Good
prepare.
game.
Tap it. Game Gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap that screen.
Good game.
Tap it, tap it. Tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Let's see those
Good
team
game.
stickers flow.
Good game.
Game Gremlins on the scene.
Good game.
Now tap that screen.
Good game.
Now tap
Gaga
that screen.
Grumps says they were trying some of the more obscure words in my new Wordle last
Good
night.
game.
Now tap that screen.
Good game.
Game Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says I am non-speaking. There is a pinned post on my page explaining. Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says I don't want people to miss out on fan club perks for want of a penny.
Grumps says at Christian Constantinu calm down.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. S. Gaga Grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts be flying, like-a-thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with S, please, Aggie. Gaga Grumps says since you got.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says most of the top have done at least 700 and only show 250 or so. Gaga Grumps says wow, great starter, Aggie. Gaga Grumps says hey Himiko.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says rain to check. If N isn't there we still get fireworks for Nay. Gaga Grumps says nay it is.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's a performance.
Gaga Grumps says fireworks for Aggie and Timmy.
On her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
From a single rose to a whole bouquet, anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Benjamin is in the house.
Grumps says at ms.lin welcome back.
Gaga Grumps says Muslin in the house. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Z. Gaga Grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word, like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word. Gaga Grumps says there's more than that.
Like a thon, race to the top. Like a thon, tap and don't stop. Like a thon, who will be crowned? Like a thon, gremlin renowned. Like a thon, fingers on fire. Like a thon, gremlins don't tire. Like a thon, hearts beat flying. Like a thon, gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Z, please Lexi.
Grumps says at Himiko took a drop of blood shush.
Gaga Grumps says zebra you got. Gaga Grumps says well and truly in like jail today Ryan. Gaga Grumps says yellow bee in need of a home.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says maybe it's something to do with the reset then. Gaga Grumps says bound fits. Gaga Grumps says we start with BO. Gaga Grumps says Dinah lol.
Grumps says Zakat, Z-I-L-I-C-H, doesn't always have to be zebra.
Gaga Grumps says boost works.
Grumps says zilch.
Gaga Grumps says S moved into number 4. Gaga Grumps says bossy is a shout. Gaga Grumps says I'm the bossiest lol.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose!
Good game.
Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let
Grumps
him
says
push
it Debbie
your
Glittens
list.
for Boise is the
Are you
proper noun
ready to
and valid.
play? Let those stickers fly! Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says Boo to Gaga. Share the live chat the chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Thanks for the follow!
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says D in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Thanks for the follow!
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says nope, no follows here. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. X. Gaga Grumps says and that ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between was Grumps' cunning plan. Gaga Grumps says to replace her with X on the wheel. Gaga Grumps says it is way possible, Himiko. Gaga Grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts beat flying, like-a-thon, gremlins defy.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says at IDFWU there is now.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with X please Ryan.
Grumps says Xanax for wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says there wasn't an X because I'm only allowed 25 slots on the wheel. But it has just been sniped. Gaga Grumps says Xanax will be a brand name.
Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS I doubt it will accept it.
Gaga Grumps says exactly.
Grumps says Xerox. It's been used as verb. Grumps says at HANDBAGS4WHINERS that's your first mistake.
Gaga Grumps says yes I spelt it right the first time then saw Ryan's and questioned my judgment lol.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout. Wipeout. Lost in the grid, can't figure it out. Oh no. Wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says what a surprise.
Grumps says told you.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Grumps says audio.
Gaga Grumps says great fits. Gaga Grumps says we start with GRA. Gaga Grumps says I was about to say this wipeout won't have the power. But it seems I have to reconsider. Gaga Grumps says grant works. Gaga Grumps says grain would have been fireworks. Gaga Grumps says sorry guys. Gaga Grumps says even Xylil holds the power of the wipeout. Who knew?
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga.
Good game.
Will the fireworks fly? A random star chosen by
Gaga
fate.
Grumps says GG
Play a
Gremlins.
part
Let's
in
see those
life
W's in the chat.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra-da-da. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the wings Timmy. Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Get it in 3. It's do or die. Only in 3. A pretty sky. A Wordle with Gaga. Thanks for the follow. A Wordle with Gaga. Da-da-da. A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab the daily half while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says nearly.
Gaga Grumps says and we're back to starting with A. Z. Gaga Grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Z, please creative.
Grumps says the cart will wipe out.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the taps, at least Ryan lol. Gaga Grumps says let's give it a spin. Gaga Grumps says a yellow N in need of a home. Gaga Grumps says nos fits. Gaga Grumps says no change. Gaga Grumps says Unify works. Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless U. Gaga Grumps says you the only vowel, but is there a second one? Gaga Grumps says drunk is in the grid. Gaga Grumps says we have a run in the middle. It's going to be a rung trap. Gaga Grumps says damn and tea is still available. Need all options for filter.
Grumps says at Let Bet 25 calm down.
Gaga Grumps says Tweeb it has to be, but we're still going to end up with choices, I think. Gaga Grumps says and Tweeb isn't valid. Gaga Grumps says we need a filter amber. We know grunt is one of the options. Gaga Grumps says Twigs is awesome. Gaga Grumps says sorted rung it is.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab
Grumps says it's summer, welcome back.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Gang gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says great filter work, guys.
Benjamin is in the
Gaga
house.
Grumps says yep, another past tense. Gaga Grumps says Steph in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grumps says it's Steph higher.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says when my tech catches up. Had to kick Tickfinity.
Grumps says it Genghis Khan got somewhere to be.
Thanks for the follow.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says I know Steph. It's only got me and Grumps and still can keep up. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. L.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Michelle in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Grumps says it's Steph, it can be arranged.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't
Gaga grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Grumps says suppress your urges to spam.
Gaga grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at Arizona that meant you.
Gaga grumps says Ryan found his mojo and led for most of that until IDF jumped him. Gaga grumps says your word starting with L, please IDF.
Grumps says treasure box is open. Grumps says at Genghis Khan that's got a sting.
Gaga grumps says it hates all of us at the moment, lol.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Grumps says at F1 Yappa 13 shush.
Gaga grumps says lilac you got. Gaga grumps says yellow A in need of a home.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga grumps says PH7 thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga grumps says Jaunt fits. Gaga grumps says A moved into number 2 Wordle Street. Gaga grumps says Savoy works. Gaga grumps says S and Y became bookends. Gaga Grumps says, are they the only three options?
Grumps says it may say something about you, whether you choose saggy or sassy.
Gaga Grumps says sassy, saggy, sappy. 3 options for 3 guesses. Gaga Grumps says sassy is in the gird. Gaga Grumps says, I will always choose sassy, lol. Gaga Grumps says sappy next.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says, see, no one needs saggy, lol.
It's
Good
playtime!
game.
Gaga is in the
Gaga Grumps says, GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly! Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go!
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says, do the do for Gaga. Share the live, chat the chat, and shower her with roses and GGs. Gaga Grumps says, indeed creative. Gaga Grumps says, thanks for doing your daily heart song. Gaga Grumps says, thanks for the roses, Jackson.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says, Charmaine in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says, if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says, let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says, we are starting with A. P. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart creative. Gaga Grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Grumps says so it decided on the middle O and Q.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts beat flying like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with P, please creative. Gaga Grumps says if your word is being filtered, try I'd like word. Gaga Grumps says yellow you and them in need of homes. Gaga Grumps says word you got filtered by TT. Gaga Grumps says music fits. Gaga Grumps says we start with moose. Gaga Grumps says musty works. Gaga Grumps says 2 options, 3 guesses, no filter needed. Gaga Grumps says Mushy is in the grid. Gaga Grumps says no real Chloe. Gaga Grumps says Musky it is.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says if you don't have the patience to wait while we check all our options before we commit, this might be the wrong room for you.
Good game.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Will the fireworks fly? A random star chosen by fate.
Benjamin is in the house.
It's a live day. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Sarah in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the Super GG as well. Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
A pretty sky.
Good game.
Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says I am non-speaking. There is a pinned post on my page explaining.
Wordle with Gaga.
Good game. 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 Good game.
Grumps says it ill creative one when where what?
Gaga Grumps says no problem Amber, I have the button on my stream deck to answer that exact question lol. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says it ill creative 1R. Right, I didn't check. Grumps says again Z.
Gaga Grumps says for the third time today we are starting with A. Z. Gaga Grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Thanks for the follow. Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Z, please, Ryan.
Grumps says at LL Creative 1774 now. Grumps says Zakat.
Gaga Grumps says I has something better than speaks. I has songs, ha. Gaga Grumps says Zazit you got.
It's a word to wipe out. No letters to shout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure it out. Oh no. Wipe out.
Gaga Grumps says let's be brave.
It's a word to wipe out.
Gaga Grumps says it's a double.
No letters to shout. Wipe out. Wipe out. Lost in the grid, can't figure it out. Wipe out. Oh no. Wipe out.
Gaga Grumps says spamming your word does not get it used. Gaga Grumps says a triple.
No letters to shout. Wipe out. Wipe out. Lost in the grid, can't figure it out. Wipe out. Oh no. Wipe out.
Gaga Grumps says second one we've ever had. Gaga Grumps says half the alphabet has been eliminated. Can't be many words left. Gaga Grumps says focus is a shout. Gaga Grumps says I am non-speaking. There is a pinned post on my page explaining. Gaga Grumps says yellow S and O in need of homes.
Grumps says at my old S needed. Grumps says it ill-creative one in this instance. It appears so. If it applies that evenly, it's perfectly fair again.
Gaga Grumps says swoon and snood. Do we have any other options? Gaga Grumps says then we don't need a filter. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose! Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours!
Gaga Grumps says let's fit one last quick in.
Let those stickers fly. Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game, Gremlins, let's
Good
go.
game.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Grumps says it crystal morning.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says good morning Crystal. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. E. Gaga Grumps says and why did no one tell me my wheel was off center lol. Gaga Grumps says like race incoming. Tap those screens. Winner chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crowd and snipe the list.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with E please Ryan.
Grumps says Ebola.
Gaga Grumps says why thanks you Crystal. Gaga Grumps says erect you got. Gaga Grumps says a green E and C moved into 3 and 4 Wordle Street. Gaga Grumps says he just likes me to say that crystal lol.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says spec fits.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 2. Fireworks for D.
Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks in the chat.
As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 p.m. UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga. Gaga Grumps says no, but I can crochet lol. Gaga Grumps says you were on so late, Crystal. I expected you to be a complete no-show today, lol.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra-ra-ra. Will the fireworks fly? A random star chosen by fate. Play your part. It's a live date. Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra-ra-ra. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Get it in 3. It's do or die. Only in 3. A pretty sky.
Gaga Grumps says we'll be on about 10 p.m. testing the auto Wordle.
Wordle with Gaga.